Welcome to Heathen Talk episode 11. Tonight we're going to go ahead and talk about community. And as usual, I'm joined by Torin and Lauren. And Lauren had some things she wanted to tell y'all.
Hey, I just want to remind everybody that if you're listening to us, you should also come join us at facebook.com/heathen talk. We are at heathen_talk on Twitter, and also we have a website now. We're at heathentalk.com, so you can come over and check us out there as well. And if you leave comments on our YouTube posts, that's great. I don't ever see them. And I don't think anyone but Josh sees them on occasion.
I thought we disabled that.
I did too.
I've tried a few times to disable them and haven't really been able to get it to consistently work.
All right, so everybody, those comments are unimportant. We're not going to address them, so we're just don't bother.
But come to Facebook, email us. You can email us at hosts@heathentalk.com. Or if you want to complain, you can email producer@heathentalk.com. And those go to our producer, Mark. But yeah, reach out to us. We really want to hear from you. Like our videos on YouTube because that helps more people see them. And, we really appreciate you guys listening and everybody who comments and engages with us. Really enjoy it.
And, part of what we've been doing here is bringing you this weekly show, and we've touched on before that, we have hosting costs and we have other expenses that come with this, and we'd like to be able to cover those. So if y'all go to www.patreon.com/heathentalk, you'll see that we've set up a page where you can make a monthly donation. We have the levels at $2 and $5 for standard donations, and for reaching those levels, you get a perk. For $2, we'll give you a shout out on the show once a month. For $5, you get the shout out, and you'll get an audio copy of the Havamal. And then we have 2 advertising slots that are open. The other thing we have there is we have a goal. If we get to $100 a month, which more than covers our costs, we're going to go ahead and do an extra episode once monthly. That will be a news and reviews show. So if we've read a book, or we'll go out and actually read a book, we will talk about that book in a special episode. It'll be 30 minutes long, but to get to that point, we need to get to $100 a month so that we can afford to take the time out of our day to do this. Again, it's patreon.com. Oh, go ahead.
I'll say this, if someone wants to donate $1,000, we'll send Torin out to be your Asa Jesus. And I'm sure for a rather high price, you can see pictures of him looking like Asa Jesus.
Absolutely. As the others can inform you, I showed them pictures of what it looks like when I don't take the time to bind my beard and hair up, and I look something like Alan Moore, only more wizardy.
It's true. It's kind of scary. He's already told me to go to hell once this evening because of it. So, again, anything you're willing to help us out with there is much appreciated, and will go towards making the show better. And we're always looking for ways to make this better, make it run more smoothly, and we need your input and your help with that.
Absolutely. So, Lauren has her own costs associated, just the special equipment she needs. Maybe your donations can help pay for a decent microphone for me, or some lights for Josh's house.
I was actually about to get up and turn my light on, so I'll let you do what you're doing and see if I can turn my light on and maybe find the cascading flag.
Okay.
And,
well.
Also, it helps us pay for hosting. We do have hosting costs. We have, it's a lot of work for us to put in the show, and we have to. For one thing, Josh and I have to put up with Torin every day, so I think we need to be compensated for that.
The pleasure of my company is compensation enough, but we'll always take tips.
Yeah.
So, that said, we'll move on to this week's toast. So, as we've been bugging you guys every week for, you need to feed us people that we can toast once a week, somebody who's active in the modern heathen community and trying to do their best to forward the ideals and make our religion grow in general and become better than it has been in the past, so we can pass something better on excuse me, to our children. Well, this week we'd like to toast you, our listeners, for failing to do that and making our choice easy this week, in that you were the only ones left to toast. And who knows, next week you might make our jobs easy again by continuing to fail in your job and continuing to fail to give us suggestions on who to toast. But that remains to be seen. So, for failing as hard as you have, here's to you, listeners.
Hail to our listeners.
So the other tradition we've had here is telling everybody what we're drinking.
Josh is particularly excited to do this week.
I am, but I'm going to go last. That's how excited I am.
You got to save that name for last. So I think we should start off by pointing out. Well, I was going to start by pointing out I don't think Lauren is drinking this week.
Lauren is on pain medication because if those of you who are watching the live show notice I'm not on camera, that's because I am doing this podcast in the dark. I have part of my eye disease is I develop photosensitivity at times, and so light is bad, and so I'm sitting in the dark doing this podcast. So yeah, I am drinking very, very nice Zevia root beer today. That's my which is like foo-foo root beer, organic, and all that stuff.
So this week your drug of choice is opiates.
Oh, no, not opiates. I don't have opiates, but yeah, my drug of choice is migraine medicines.
Fair enough. Well, I guess that'll move us on to me so we can get to Josh quicker.
Yeah.
This week I'm drinking Victory Fest beer because it is moving into the Oktoberfest season, and even if we're not quite there, the beer stores haven't noticed. It's starting to come every year a little bit earlier in the beer stores, kind of like Christmas. But this is one thing that I don't mind because the beers that you get during the Oktoberfest season are some of my favorites on the planet. And Victory's Face Beer does not disappoint. For those of you watching our YouTube channel, you can see the label there. Victory's a fantastic brewery from out east, and I first had this last year, and as soon as I saw it on the shelves this year, I had to have it again. It's a Marzen, and I highly recommend it. It's delicious.
So I did just realize that I'm actually continuing to drink beers brewed in Oregon, where the best beers in the world are brewed. As evidence, I'd like to present DJ Jazzy Hef. None of your beers are that cool. I win. The internet right here. I win.
Well, he certainly does win the best named beer. I'm not sure about the best tasting.
Well, it's a Heffy. It's an easy drinker.
There's
in
only so
reality,
much
it's a
you can do with
summer beer.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do with a Hef. But it's fair, and I know the brewery, and despite the fact they are from Oregon and therefore are not quite as good as the ones you're going to get further north, it's still a good brewery.
So, I do, real quick, I have to apologize. I completely spaced and forgot to find my flag. Horn will take that out on me later, and I'm sure I will hear no end of it on the subreddit. I apologize. If one of you will send me a private message once every 24 hours, maybe I'll remember. And
maybe
that reminds me, holding people accountable is something community does, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, now there's usually penalties to go along with that sort of thing, right?
There is. Are you suggesting a penalty?
I'm actually thinking that since this was a promise you made to our listeners, that our listeners should suggest a penalty. I would be, however, willing to suggest the framework for the penalty.
If you suggest what I think you're going to suggest, you can go right to hell.
Well, what I'm going to suggest is that once upon a time, Josh made a mistake, and his penalty was to drink a bad beer. And to his credit, he drank a much worse beer than I think any of us would have chosen for him. However, this time I think it should be up to you, our listeners, to select Josh's beer for next week. What do you say, Josh?
You put me on the spot.
I did.
However, our listeners don't contribute, so I should be safe. So,
you hear that? If you don't contribute, and now I'm going to go ahead and throw a caveat onto this. If you want to suggest a beer, you also have to suggest a toastee, since he'll be toasting that person with that beer. So there's your bit of motivation to do your damn jobs
I'm
as
going
our
to
listeners.
put one limit on this.
It can't be a Steel Reserve margarita?
No, that wasn't going to be the limit, actually.
Oh, wow. Then your standards are low.
My standards are higher than you think. I demand creativity. If somebody suggests Coors, they're disqualified. No Coors, no Budweiser, it's disqualified. It doesn't count. Everybody drinks that. Everybody knows it's shit. Get creative. And also, I can't do milk stout. I'm lactose intolerant. Sorry.
And do make sure it's something that is going to be available to them over in Cascadia Hipster Land.
Everything's available to us here. Like, unless it's a regional brew that you can't get outside of a region, then everything is available. So, no Yingling is as bad as that is, because that's almost impossible to get a hold of here. But have I just alienated an entire region of users by calling Yingling bad?
I heard you say it different, as in it's bad we can't get it here, but that's just me.
Oh no, I don't want to have anybody mistaken in what I was saying. Yingling is a bad beer. There are certainly worse though.
There are.
Okay, now that we've lost that segment of the country, let's move on.
So, community. We wanted to. Excuse me. What's the downside to Heffies? We wanted to talk about community this week to kind of touch on some things we said in the first couple episodes about how important community is to heathenry. And I know we'd made some statements that had made some people, I want to say uncomfortable. They weren't really upset, but they didn't quite get what we were trying to say, in that they felt that saying a heathen without community isn't really a heathen was unfair. And so I want to ask the question to my illustrious co-hosts. When we say that, are we talking about just a community of heathens?
Absolutely not. In my opinion, absolutely not, because that's just not... I mean, we live in it. Because we're not part of the overculture, we can't limit our interactions to just heathens. In a world where heathens were all heathens, or I said that completely wrong. In a world where everyone around you was heathen, then yeah, community is probably made up of mostly heathens. But now, my community is so much more than that.
So what about you, Torin? Is community to you just the heathens in your realm?
Well, no, certainly not. And I have to say that if anybody ever got the impression, at least on my part, that I was saying that you can't be a heathen without community, then I apologize for communicating that badly, because that is certainly not something I would say. In fact, I was recently involved in a debate about that very thing on the internet. I know, of all places. Even worse, it was on Facebook. But it was a debate where making comments kind of brought people to that, black or white argument, where because of what I was saying, they said, oh, so you're saying I'm not a heathen. That's not at all what I'm saying. And certainly, if I will say that if you don't have a community of heathens, then you should be trying to find one or trying to create one. But you can still be a heathen without. It's just a matter of realizing that being a solitary heathen is a step on the road rather than a destination, if that makes sense. And as I think we're going to get more into in this episode, your community is not limited to just the heathens around you. Even if you have, a big, strong tribe around you of heathens, there are still all the other people in your life that are not heathens that are still going to be part of your community.
So, I mean, and that touches on something that's pretty important. We don't exist in a vacuum. You can't just have a community of just heathens or I know of a couple of groups that are, oh, well, we're outside of this. We're not part of the greater community. And you can't have that. You are part of the overculture. You're part of the world you live in. And part of your community is the people you live around. It just is. And so
Absolutely.
for me, my part of my community isn't just the heathens and the Eugene, Oregon area. It's the people in the Eugene, Oregon area. I share common interest with them. I share a lot of common habits and ticks with them, and that's part of my community. It's part of my well, it's part of my what's the word I'm looking for? Can't word.
Well, I think the best way to put it was actually put by Kevin, or Ailglad for those of you Reddit users out there, is that when dealing with heathens from outside of his community, heathens, in the Midwest or California or up north or something like that, he'll look you straight in the face and tell you that he has more in common with his Christian mailman than he does with those other heathens outside of his area, because they are not part of his community, whereas his Christian mailman is.
Right. And I think that's an important. I think it's an important note to make. I mean, I made it recently in a comment on something that I have more in common with the guy sitting next to me on the bus than I do with, some dude sitting in, let's say, New York, usually. And that is the community connection. And if you're not working to make that better, then you're doing something wrong.
Well, it's not like anybody ever does it wrong.
I have to agree with you guys. I see, for me, to be completely honest, especially given kind of my predilections in politics, I actually, I probably have more in common with my gamer friends that I see twice a week, or the people I'm in class with every day, or, than I do with most heathens, especially ones I interact with online, because the, culturally, just like, I disagree sometimes with Josh and Torin because culturally we have a different heathenry. I am an Ozark heathen. They are Cascadian heathens. And there are differences there in our approaches that have evolved just over how heathenry has evolved, especially in the pre-internet days.
Well, and this gets into a topic that I know is near and dear to Torin's heart, and that is the fact that we do have regional heathenry. It's not often touted as such, but a Midwest heathen is going to handle things differently than a Cascadian heathen, who's going to handle things differently than a Northeast heathen.
Absolutely.
That's just it's just the reality of our life. But I want to ask one more question, real quick. And Torin, I know you're leading currently in your area, so I want to ask, why is being involved in the greater community so important?
Well, I mean, for a lot of reasons. I mean, for one, your tribe has to exist within that community. As we've joked about before, unless you're starting your compound up in the mountains somewhere, moving to the National Redoubt in Idaho, you're not going to escape the fact that you're living amongst the overculture. Just as are all sorts of other people who aren't necessarily part of the overculture but have to live amongst it. So already you have a connection to it, whether you like it or not. And your reputation matters outside of heathen circles, in every way in your life, in making your life better, in trying to create a better life for your descendants, for trying to create a better life for those around you. Your reputation matters. So if you don't engage with the overculture, then you are going to have a bad time at that. And then there's the fact that most of sorry, I got distracted there. My mental train just derailed for a second. But as far as engaging with the community, it's sort of making us a little bit less different to the rest of the overculture. We've talked before about the subject of, other with a capital O. You don't want to be other. Other is Utengard. You don't want to be Utengard to the community that you have to live in. So when it comes down to it, you pretty much have the option of engaging with your community or dying.
What about you, Torin? Sorry, not Torin. Lauren, your names rhyme. Yay!
I didn't notice that until tonight, so yeah, that's confusing, I'm sure.
So, Lauren, why do you
yes.
feel it's important?
Well, the big thing is, you have to understand that sometimes my point of view on this comes from my background in media. The more that we are just normal good folks, the less stigmatism there is in othering. And quite frankly, there's the other side of the table. What is good, usually for my community, is good for my tribe. I mean, a strong, whatever you want to call it, whether to me, the things I'm interested in, things like, cleaning up the creek that runs through my neighborhood is good for my family because that's, that affects our property values. That affects all kinds of things. And so to me, we are not on an island. We are not this monolith. Oh boy, this will go back, touching back to episode 9 in our 9 noble virtues. We are not this ideal that some people have that we should be, be cowboys standing alone and blah blah blah. We are a part of a symbiotic system, and what happens to my neighbors affects me. It may not be very much, but if my across the street neighbor gets sick and can't mow his yard, well, that's sure going to increase the number of mosquitoes in mine. It's really a matter of, to some degree, it is being a little selfish in that thought that, well, I need to think about this and I need to be somewhat involved in this because it's going to affect me and my family and my tribe. And also, it's just good for people in general. When you help others, it actually helps your self-esteem. It helps your self-worth. And that's just generally good for being a good person.
Well, so there is something, I've seen a few links today posted for a couple of articles, and a common theme that comes up is people tend to think of non-Christian religions as radical spirituality. And I want to drive home the fact that radical is a term that is loaded with a political initiative to separate yourself from the overculture. And heathenry isn't that. Heathenry is very much about protecting and being part of the community. And it's not that we don't recognize that there is this overculture of Christianity and even in a lot of ways an overculture of atheism that denigrates the polytheistic worldview. But there is that part of us that is very much about, these are my people because I live near, with, and among them, and I have to protect that from the outside, from the other. And that is something that we can't really get away from.
Well, I think you make a good point there at distinguishing. Earlier I made the point of not allowing ourselves to be the other, and you make a good point there of not subjecting our neighbors to being the other, which is extremely important. You can't live with the other among you.
Right, and I'm sure Lauren has an opinion on this because she's a heathen woman, and heathen women have opinions.
On everything.
I love them for it.
I'm just going to say this, so do heathen men.
I don't really do.
I don't know a heathen that doesn't have opinions on lots of things. To me, it really is heathenry really is an integrated religion. The point and purpose of heathenry is community. And I kind of want to touch back to where we started, where when I say, now this is me, this is Lauren, when Lauren says you cannot be a heathen without community, I don't mean a heathen community. You cannot be heathen if you are not integrated into your greater surroundings as far as your community. Because to separate yourself out is to completely divorce yourself from a heathen worldview. And it's something, I'll be honest with you, it's something that I can struggle with sometimes because I am I am not as integrated into my community. I live in the Deep South, or the Mid-South as we call it, and I am surrounded by evangelical Christians. And so sometimes, and it's interesting because we were discussing kind of, someone had talked about, kind of evangelicizing Asatru and heathenry. And I have to keep my mouth shut. And I think keeping my mouth shut is the best thing for my community because I don't want to cause myself to be othered from that community. I'm not going to lie and say I'm a Christian, but I'm not going to go around and go, look at me, I'm a heathen, blah, blah, blah. Because, quite frankly, I like having a home and do not wish to have it burned down. You laugh, but some places around here.
Oh, I've lived in those type of places before, so I understand.
But it's very, if you were I'm going to say, if you're not involved with your community on some level as a heathen, whether it's, and not just your heathen, your tribe or your kindred or your hearth or your theod, if you are not involved, whether it means you are go to neighborhood watch meetings or participate, volunteer, whatever, I think you're doing it wrong. And I think you don't understand kind of the fundamentals of heathenry.
Well, and so this is going to open up an opportunity for me to brag a little bit about my own group. As a group, we do things to benefit our community. Every year we do the Polar Plunge, which benefits the Special Olympics. And I haven't been able to do it recently because I've had some injuries right around the time they do it. But a couple of years back, my group convinced me to put on pigtails and a tutu and run into the Columbia River in the middle of winter.
And for a high enough donation to our Patreon account, you can see a picture of that.
Hell. Yeah.
I actually am considering doing our Polar Plunge, which, just to state for the record, will be a whole lot colder than whatever these guys who think, oh my gosh, it's so awful in Seattle where it's always like above freezing.
Who says it's awful here?
When you do it's not really a polar plunge if it's 60 degrees. That's all I'm saying.
I will have you know that the year I did it, it was -1 degrees, -20 with a wind chill, and the water was warm compared to outside.
And
Okay.
Lauren,
Yeah.
you will have a hard time finding bodies of water around here that are that warm.
Yeah, everything is cold.
Our water tends to stay well below the ambient temperature. It's a current thing.
We have that here because we have cold springs and hot springs, but
Yeah, most people don't swim in the Sound even in the summer.
yeah, I just thought you wouldn't swim there because it's polluted slightly.
Oh no, it's actually
And
not
there
bad.
are large boats and stuff, but yeah, what do I know?
Not much.
I wouldn't swim in the Arkansas River if you paid me, so. Actually, here we go. For a large enough donation, I will go swim in the Arkansas River.
And you'll
As
notice
you can tell, people were a little hard up for cash.
just a little bit. And you'll notice just as Lauren did with her offer to swim in the Arkansas River, and just as I did with my offer to see Josh in tutus and pigtails, I left that number open so that Josh can determine it.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll even say this. I'm planning on doing Polar Plunge here, so I may be hitting our listeners up for, hey, come and donate to this because it's for a worthy cause.
So now that we've diverted enough from what Josh was saying there,
so communities,
getting involved with your community.
Yeah.
Getting involved with your community and doing things out in the open. And I wrote a blog post about anonymity and how it doesn't help. And a lot of kindreds I see do this, a lot of kindreds, tribes, whatever, they only do things as a group in private. And that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help your local community. If you're going to do stuff as a group, go and do something like the Polar Plunge, go and volunteer, go do important events. Torin, you just did a thing for fish because you're a hippie. You know, those are important things that you should do as a group to not only spread your group's reputation, but to make your community better.
Well, I kind of want to tell a little story on the Arkansas folks. Back in 2004 or 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit, we actually, not ourselves, which is Swagwar Kindred, which is my group here, and then the Northwest Arkansas Kindred, spearheaded a huge, huge clothing and food and water drive. I mean, we took more stuff than many of the, we're talking about all together, there's maybe 20 of us. And we got the local parenting community involved. I mean, we really put forth the effort and and were able to collect a ton of stuff and take it to where they were distributing it. And it wasn't so much about, we did it and we weren't anonymous about it, but at the same time, we didn't go around bragging about it. Wasn't even one of the people that helped organize it. I just showed up, and I could still see at the time, so I drove a car over full of stuff. But man, it's just, we've got to do this stuff. We've got to. Well, I mean, to hit on a very cliche thing to say, we are, as individuals and as groups, our deeds, and we are known by our deeds. However, if you live in an area where it is unsafe to identify as heathen publicly, I understand.
Well, and I remember this, and you'll note I sometimes make references to Raven Radio. I'm a huge Raven Radio fan. I've listened to him since it started. It was great. I loved it. And there was an episode where they were interviewing someone. No, he wasn't even an interview. It was just a guest host. And he talked about how the best compliment he got in his Midwest community was being told he was such a good Christian.
No, I recall that episode, and honestly, I've received that compliment once or twice, and I never turn my nose up at it because that's essentially the concept of one culture honoring you in their own way. That's the highest form of compliment in a lot of communities. So take it as it's intended.
Well, and that's something you should strive to be given the highest compliments you can receive in your region. In Cascadia, it's probably going to be, wow, I didn't know atheists could have such strong ethics because we're hipsters over here. But in the Midwest, it's very much, wow, you're such a good Christian. And, in New York, holy crap, you didn't curse me out for not cutting you off. So, it's all regional. I lost my train of thought.
And just remember, complaints about these statements, go to producer@heathentalk.com. I agree. I think that I think that we have to be good people, and we have to be a part of our community. And one of the problems I see with other non-Abrahamic faiths, especially New Age faiths, is how desperately they want to be different. And I admit, I don't always agree with the overculture in my area. I rarely agree with it. I'm not, I'm living in an area that, by virtue of my existing, I am going against the overculture just by not being a Christian. But at the same time, it's really kind of amazing, and I compare it sometimes with two other things, whereas I don't want to stand out. I don't want to have a giant heathen pride rally. And no, and I'm not, and you know what? I wasn't like that a few years ago. I've really matured in that. I can understand the need for groups who are legitimately oppressed to need to have the kind of that thing for normalization. But the fact of the matter is, comparatively to many people, I am a pretty privileged white girl.
Well, so there's an important point to be made here. We've had Josh Heath on the show, and we do want heathen military members to be recognized. The point I think we need to make is that while we don't need to have a heathen pride day, we do want people to be proud and open, or free to be open, about being heathen. It's not about making waves or being radical. It's about being a genuinely good person. And when somebody says, wow, you're such a good Christian, you want to have the freedom and the respect in the community to say, well, actually, I'm a heathen. And know that when you do that, you're not going to become a second-class citizen. We want that freedom. But the way you get it, especially from a heathen point of view, is to first gain the respect of your community, which means you have to be part of it.
We have to put in the work. When it all comes down to it, you have to be willing to put in the work that it takes to get the respect. You don't automatically deserve that respect. We have to be willing to put in the work to get it.
And the work doesn't always have to be hard.
No.
Josh referenced me doing a thing to save the fish earlier. That was a partnership between Northwest Peaks Brewery and Sound Salmon Solutions up here, where the entire sum of my effort put into it was to show up at one of their brew houses and drink beer, because a portion of the sale price of the beer went to Sound Salmon Solutions. So, I mean, it can sometimes be as simple as just deciding where you're going to go get that drink tonight. Now, granted, that's a very, very ideal situation. But,
it's also very Cascadian. I'm just saying.
It really is. They know we're going to show up and drink the microbrews anyway. They might as well use some of the money to help the fish. And you can make fun of me for being a hippie to save the fish all you want, but salmon is delicious. And I want them to be around for a very, very long time.
Oh, man.
Delicious.
I mean, it's sometimes can be as simple as mowing your yard.
Well,
being a decent neighbor.
I don't think we should make it part of being a heathen. And this comes into a lot of more difficult to understand concepts. Part of being a heathen is being a good person. Not because you have this altruistic streak where you're like, hey, yay, flowers and love and salmon like Thorin. But because being a good person benefits your people. That's just the way it is.
Yes.
And so, yes, mowing your lawn is important and it makes you a good neighbor and all this stuff. But you can't just do surface level things and expect to get the... So the line I used was heathens hoard a reputation like Christians hoard converts. And we do.
Yeah.
We want the reputation, we want the recognition, and unfortunately, it hasn't matured to this level for a lot of people, but the purpose to that reputation is to benefit your people. And so
Right.
if you want your people to feel the benefits of, well, if you want your people to have those benefits, then you have to build your reputation so that it rubs off on them. And you're not going to be able to build that reputation by just being surface level nice. You need to get involved.
Absolutely. Yo,
And
excuse me a
honestly,
That
second.
was my little my
Yeah.
high horse for a second there.
Yeah, I
And
have to make apologies for all the throat clearing tonight. I don't know what's up with it. I'm trying to keep it as much off of the mic as I can.
for me, I in general think heathenry makes me want to be a decent person. And sometimes my thoughts are altruistic, but in general, it comes down to a point that we've hit on in this podcast, and I've hit on, Lord, if you have a discussion with me on Facebook or Reddit or wherever, I'm going to tell you pretty much this, that it is, your thought process as you evolve and grow up in your heathenry, I should say. You become a better person just by adapting that kind of high level worldview of that which is good for the tribe is good. No matter how you define, as long as you're not taking yourself to an isolationist place where you go like the people who think we should abolish public schools because they don't have children. But yeah. Well, I don't have children, but I kind of like having doctors and cashiers who know how to count change, and what do I know?
Well, obviously not much if you think we should still have public schools. Those are terrible places.
I liked my public school.
That was sarcasm, everybody. I just want to be clear on that because nobody laughed.
Because sometimes, Torin, your sarcasm sounds like your normal voice.
That's what we refer to in the business as deadpan, and unfortunately, if you'd met some of my friends, you'd understand why that's my normal mode of delivery.
But yeah, I mean, I think that this focus on heathenry, or on community in heathenry, is what makes heathenry so viable, is what makes us. I think that when it comes down to it, when you get these compliments, oh, you're such a good Christian, or, we're not really seen as, and when you get into that point, you're not seen as much as other as more, I love that term, radical faiths. I really love, because it's very, having gone to some pagan pride events, that's totally on par with the difference. And having been Wiccan, also.
Yeah. Well, I will say another thing that's kind of a tangential to this is another reason that engaging with our communities is important is because if we don't engage in our communities and we don't, start to build this sort of reputation for ourselves as heathens and for heathenry as a whole, the people around us are going to get their information about what heathens are from the media. And if you'll notice, anybody who is different from the counterculture, when they are mentioned in the media, it's very rarely in the positive light. Just because it's the negative stuff that makes good news. So you're only going to hear about heathens in the media when somebody identifying as a heathen does something terrible, and the unfortunate fact of our religion is often that means racist. So getting your community to understand who we really are is sort of important.
Well, and I mean, let's be completely honest here. Probably the last time that that heathenry was mentioned in national press was the guy who may have been heathen that shot and killed several people at the Jewish Community Center. And even then, there's debate whether or not he was actually heathen.
He was not.
Time heathenry was mentioned in the press was the Vice article that came out when the new was it Thor or the new Avengers movie came out?
Avengers.
Heathenry.
I don't count
religion.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I don't count Vice as mainstream media. That you're like Vice isn't something that my neighbor is going to have read more than likely, but a news story on our local ABC affiliate is much more likely that everyone around me has seen.
Right. And well, I suppose that Vice is technically media, but it's certainly not news.
But
we could do a whole show.
I disagree with the both of you.
Okay.
But that's beside the point.
Well, go. No, about Vice.
About Vice.
Oh, okay. Then never
and
mind. I was
just
going to tell
because
you.
I come from that more radical portion of society. Even though I reject the radical spirituality label.
I can guarantee that my 74-year-old neighbor saw coverage of that shooting on our local NBC or ABC affiliate, or CBS probably because they're old, but has never heard of Vice.
Probably on Fox.
Unless he has HBO. Our local Fox News, that's another story. Unless he has HBO, since they have a show now. But I mean, I'm just saying, it doesn't really matter. The point being that the only time that people tend to make the news is bad news, because the phrase "if it bleeds, it leads" is actually used in news. I know this from experience.
So I want to pull us back a little bit.
Okay.
I want to redirect us.
Crack that whip, Josh.
I think we have. I'm sorry. What?
I said, crack that whip, Josh.
It's what the boss is for. We have beaten the horse to death about why, if you're a heathen, you should be making your community better. But we haven't really talked about why a heathen community is important, and what the importance of having a tribe or a kindred or a hearth or a folkstead or whatever the hell you want to call it.
I think we should just use tribe as our generic and go with that.
From now on, if you're a group, you're referred to as a tribe. Lauren has spoken, and she is Queen of Arkansas.
I do hold the title within my kindred of she who must be obeyed.
And I will point out, I think when it got mentioned in a previous show, probably our tribe building show, when somebody called me out for consistently using the word tribe, that at least on my part, that's what I'm going to use unless I'm talking about a specific group that has their own word for it. If we're talking about Hawkshearth kindred, I'll call them a kindred, as an example.
Now, I want to bring in a little clarification here. First, when we say talking about building heathen communities, we are talking about local, regional communities. We are not talking about Facebook communities. We are not talking about web forums. We aren't talking about, even you guys, as much as we love our fans, you guys aren't our community. You are people who listen to our podcast. And it's not a slight. It's just fact.
Well, I think, we mentioned certain words that have common usage and making differentiations with that capital letter, things like worth and luck and reputation. I think community can be another one we can throw in there that has an implied capital letter when we're talking about this kind of stuff. And yeah, you cannot have a capital C community online.
Well, and that's important to make, but it's kind of... it's quite literally beside the point. If the point is building a heathen community, the online world is like next to it, but not part of it.
It's tangential. It's tangential.
Sure.
But,
and so,
I will say, okay, we're all talking over each other now. I'm going to shut up.
Lauren, speak.
Talk.
Lauren, speak.
Okay. Now, I just wanted to make that very, very clear, because of the mindset, especially with new heathens, and I'm not gonna scold you or anything for it. It's just a fact that with a lot of new heathens, they come in and they hear this, they call you brother, or they call you sister, and that's because of the overculture once again. And For this, we are specifically you're talking about local and regional stuff. We're talking about people you see face to face.
Right. I mean, so I know we've done an entire episode on tribe building, um, and we did cover a lot in there why it's important. Uh, but I think that is an important point with an episode about community to go over again why it's important, even if we're not discussing the specifics of tribe building in general. Um, and I think before I pass this one back to Josh, I can go ahead and make us all Toby's heathen crush for the day by pointing out that 3 is the magic number.
Most of you won't get that, and that's fine. We're going to make Toby elucidate later.
Are we? Are we going to drag Toby on here to do that?
Eventually, I'm going to make him. I don't care what he says. He's going to come on and talk about his stuff because I think it's important, and I'm the boss, so you know.
Well, oddly enough, 3 is a great number psychologically because without fail, you can remember 3 points.
That's true.
Random stuff that came up in class today that we said 3 is a magic number. I don't know.
So, the point I wanted to get to before we were distracted was that while being a part of your community is vital, having heathens with which you can do ritual, because as Torrin pointed out, there is a magic number, is also important. Yes, you can be a heathen without other heathens around. That is the nature of our world. We live in a world that is not heathen. But finding and searching out and looking for those groups should be something you do. And I think it's something that is quite often overlooked or perhaps even ignored because of the politics involved. And that, we could do a whole episode on that, which we won't because no. But I think it's important to drive home, I'll talk about mine eventually, but Torrin, what do you get from your tribe?
Well, like I said, we went over a lot of this during the tribe building episode. I mean, if nothing else, I have a group of people that I can always go to. These people are always there for me. If I call on them, they will come. If they call on me, I will come. There is the idea, behind ritual that, like we are joking about, 3 is the magic number. There is most ritual you cannot, or most of a certain class of ritual you cannot do without at least the base number of 3 people to accomplish it. It's just not physically possible, and it's definitely not esoterically possible. These things are important. Then there's also the concept that without tribe, you have no Thu. What you have is UPG, but it has nowhere to go, if that makes sense. It stays in that realm forever. It's like a doctoral candidate who writes a thesis but can never deliver it and have it, scrutinized. It just stagnates and it becomes nothing to anybody but you. So, in these ways, having tribe, having a heathen community is important.
I agree. I am probably the person here that has one of the smallest groups, smallest tribes. There's basically 2 families. We're super small. But you know what? That group is so... I know that I can, email, call, text, whatever, they're going to be there for me. I know that, we all lived together in the same house at one point. We used to joke we had the highest population of heathens per square mile of any place in the world. But
you should come visit us in Cascadia.
So I definitely think it's also good just to have people who understand when you say things. I mean, we have crazy inside jokes, and I mean, they're real. I mean, they are like the other members of my kindred are like family to me.
Well, I think you just touched on a really interesting point there, Lauren, is having people around you that understand you.
Yeah,
Um, because without you can't exist when there's an entire portion of you that is isolated.
Well,
If that makes sense.
and this is something, I mean, it's come up in my group specifically, and you know, I'm I am the only single adult male in my group, and my group is able to empathize with me on a heathen level that, I mean, all I get from my mom is, uh, oh, it'll be all right, honey. It's gonna be fine. But my people are able to look at me and see how I look at the world because they look at the world the same way. And despite any disagreements we have in a non-heathen realm, despite any political disagreements or anything like that, we understand fundamentally how each of us views the world around us, and we're able to connect and empathize with each other on a level that non-heathens just won't be able to.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I get a lot of things from my family that are extremely important to my psychological well-being, but on the heathen end of it, my mother called me yesterday and was discussing some upcoming plans that my wife and I have, and she idly asked me, "Oh, what religion are you into these days?" I've been a heathen for 17 years. There's certain things that your family may never get around to understanding, and in my case, this is one of those things. My mother is never going to quite understand that this is actually a thing.
my mom just tells everyone I'm an Episcopalian.
Denial comes in all forms.
Well, yeah. So I mean, my mom probably wouldn't even acknowledge I wasn't heathen. I mean, I can't talk. I love my family, but my parents are evangelical Christians, and my brother, who I'm very close to, is an evangelical atheist. So I'm kind of in this weird place where and my husband's an atheist. And so having these people in my life, even though we kind of count spouses who aren't heathen as, associate members, having these people in my life is really important to me. It's really important to have that.
Well,
To
and
have that,
that's
yeah, it's something that you can't have with someone who's not heathen.
and I think that's the important point is that, and Brian Smith on our episode where we had him on mentioned this, that the Theodish groups don't view kindred members as kin because they're not, but they do fill a very specific role in their lives, and that these are they're as close to family as you can get in these instances without actually being blood family.
Yeah.
And it's because of the ability to empathize and the importance of that relationship. My group has an unofficial slogan of quality over quantity. We want quality people, not 70 people,
Right.
And it's
Well,
because you have to connect in such a way that you need a quality person with common ethics, and you're not going to get that if you are just accepting anyone.
right, and I mean, it was mentioned, Lauren pointed out earlier how small her tribe is, and I've said in the past, mine is, relatively new. We're maybe 6 months old, and we're still very, very small, but as I mentioned earlier, I can call any one of them if I need something, and it will be done. I will get what I need, and vice versa for them. So you can't get that if you're just drawing people in for numbers. And I've seen groups collapse because they were more concerned about having numbers than they were about having quality.
I don't, I think that's one thing, I say that our group is small, and our group is small partially on circumstances. We just live in an area with not a lot of people who aren't Christian, and partially on the fact that we are not, what heathens are around here, we don't agree with on very, very basic philosophical levels. And the discussion came up the other, today or yesterday, I don't know. I'm kind of, my days are running together right now. About, is it better to have a bad kindred or no kindred? Was the question. Was it, better basically to have a bad tribe or be a member, be by yourself or be a member of a bad tribe? And I think the answer is 100%. You are better off on your own than being a part of a group that's doing the things you find against your whole ethic and morals.
Right.
And that comes back to that quality versus quantity statement. The group is going to look for quality members, but you should find a quality group.
Yes.
And it's very important that when you're looking at these groups that you understand the people, which is why you have to be involved with us time before you can even be membership, because it's that important. And it's not a good fit for, then you shouldn't be there. And if it's not a good fit for them, then again, you shouldn't be there.
Well, right, and to address.
It's 8 o'clock, which means we've got 30 minutes left. And this is when we usually start answering questions. And currently it looks like we only really have 2 questions. And so I'm going to pose this first one to, because you have the furthest distance between you and other heathens. If chat would stop resetting. Is it important for heathens who are separated from a community to actively seek one despite obstacles like distance? Sure, we've already answered that, but Lauren, can you give that a direct answer?
I'm going to say I do think it's important. Here's the thing. I thought for the longest time that I was the only heathen, and like me and one other guy, Brad, were the only heathens in town. And it turns out that there are a lot more. And so I think you do need to be open, be willing to meet people. And if it turns into a situation where, and you have the means to do it, I mean, out in Texas, people drive 2 and 3 hours sometimes. For us to meet with another kindred here, it's a 2 or 3 hour drive. I mean, I think it is definitely important within don't put yourself in the poorhouse to do it, but if it's within your means, by all means, connect with people, even if you don't end up and don't go out looking for a kindred. Go out looking to connect with people. And then just see how you fit with these people and then go from there. But absolutely 100%, if you can, yeah, I mean, it will change your whole perspective, and it's really good for you if you can. But don't beat yourself up if you're like me and I don't drive, and so I'm dependent on the goodness of others, and I can't always go.
Right. So, I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, in all the years that I've been a heathen, I've had a coherent tribe for the last 6 months, and which might seem odd for somebody who's, constantly banging on about how important that is. But it was a sacrifice I made because I was looking for the specific quality that I needed. And, maybe I'm a little bit pickier than some, and ended up solving my problem by starting a tribe. But the point is, yeah, you're going to be tying your luck to these people. So you shouldn't just join a tribe because you need a tribe and because that tribe is there. It has to be somebody that fits with you and that you fit with. And if you don't have that, then you're causing more damage than you're fixing by joining that group. But the fact remains that remaining solo in that situation is a step on the path. It is not somewhere that you should get comfortable being.
I also want to say that even if, especially if you're like me and live in a more isolated kind of area, even if you don't necessarily think, or you're not actively searching for new members for your group or whatever, if there's local heathens and you have at all the ability, go out and meet people. It for heathens. I mean, yeah, occasionally you're going to run into crazy white supremacists and all kinds of insanity. But then that's great stories to tell. Oh man, do you remember that time that we went to that meetup and we were the only person there without a swastika? I mean, yeah,
I've
but
got some of those stories.
yeah, I think we all do. But I mean, that's the point. Go out and meet people, and because I found that, and we were having a discussion the other day, Josh, about you go to an event and some kid shows up, some punk kid, but you never know when you're going to be a good influence on them, and they're going to see how happy, they're going to see where you are in your level of contentment and community and want that, and be willing to reconsider what they think is heathenry to achieve it.
Absolutely. And that's an important thing to make is as much as we all hate on one particular aspect of the heathen online world, people can and have grown and changed over time, and the way that happens is by good examples and positive influences from people who aren't crazy. However, I do want to move on to another question. I think this is a good one for an open admittance policy, or are you doing a probationary period? What do you think about a more democratic structure or more theater structure?
Well, in the case of my tribe specifically, first of all, we do have the probationary period, essentially, where we use the word thrall because it's convenient and everybody happens to know what it means in this area. But it's a time where you are trying to feel out the group, and the group is feeling you out. The group is also trying to teach you at that point, trying to introduce you to our ways, to our thu. And if you make it to the end of that period, that's when you become a full member and you actually have a say within the tribe. As far as the structure, I've taken more than a few cues from the theodes or theodish belief, at least as far as I am familiar with it, from just the theodsmen that I know, in that we do have a hierarchical structure. We have a chieftain that is above the tribal members, but the chieftain remains so on the sufferance of the rest of the tribe. As long as he keeps doing his job well, he will continue being chieftain and his word will be law. But the minute that the tribe decides that the chieftain's not doing their job well, he's out on his ass. And the best thing he can do is just gracefully step down and allow somebody else to step up. So it's kind of a weird mix between, the democratic nature of choosing the leader and deciding whether to follow him, but also with a certain, what's the word I'm looking for, dictator quality to that while you are in that position. His word is law until the tribe decides it's not.
Benevolent dictatorship.
Well,
Right,
it's
with
not
an
even
outclass.
dictatorship.
Yeah.
It's very much it's a chieftainship in all you are your group's king, and in a heathen worldview the king is king until people say no, you're not anymore,
Right,
and then
exactly.
they throw you in a bog. Luckily for you, Seattle doesn't have many bogs around, so it'll just be the bay. It'll be fine.
The bay. We have a sound here, thank you very much. Get with the program.
Sorry, I'm not used to those funky hipster words.
It's a fjord, man.
So We do have a question specifically for Lauren.
Uh-oh.
As a
I
person who
didn't
lived in
do
New
it.
Orleans during, I hope not. As a person who lived in, this is from the person who supplied most of our questions, JREDC. I don't know how to pronounce that. There are too many consonants and one vowel.
Hi, we'll just call you JR.
As a person who lived in New Orleans during Katrina, thank you so much for all the work you and your community did. From someone, it's not even a question, it's just a statement. I'm an idiot. Thank you. He's thanking you for all the work you and your community did, as he's someone who may have personally benefited from your contributions in that arena.
Well, I will say this. It was a bit of a selfish thing. My kindred brother Ben went to college in Louisiana, in New Orleans. I worked at a radio station in New Orleans, so we definitely had some emotional tie to it. But I'm happy to do it, and I think we should always be kind of happy to help out where we can, especially something like that, which was really such an easy thing to do compared to what other people were going through.
Well, and that's really, I mean, even up here, and I keep bragging on my kindred today because they're kind of awesome. One of my kindred members organized shipments of goods to the region, and it was so much easier for us to deal with that than it was for the people going through the tragedy. That while we appreciate the thanks, it almost feels like you can't really accept it. It's like I didn't do all that much. I gave what I could, but I didn't go through it.
Yeah, I mean,
If that makes any sense.
Even compared to the people who live here in Little Rock, who did more than we did. I mean, there were people who opened up their homes, and there were people who opened up their lives, and their that had facilities like church fellowship halls where they could let people stay. That we didn't. Uh, it was small, and it was done to help not just those people, but also to help the people in our community who were doing a lot more work than we were. So, but I'm glad that you made it through it, JR, and happy that you're listening with us tonight. Did I lose you guys? Did I lose you guys?
Hello?
Hi.
Did everything
Everything.
die?
Yeah, for a second there. We're still on air, apparently.
So I cannot hear Torin. Torin, if you can hear me, hold up two fingers. All right.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you
Yes.
now.
Okay.
Yay! Technical errors. Sorry, I had the
God,
blood of a small child, and I'm 4 beers in.
All right, fair enough. So let me go ahead and repeat that question because I don't know how much of it actually made it to the air. Morgane asks, how do you determine if a group or an individual is good? And I was trying to shoot that question over to Lauren to begin with, so let's see how that works.
I'm gonna say the big thing is, first of all, what are they doing? What are their deeds? How do they line up with your understanding of heathenry? Um, Also, I'm a big believer in gut instinct. If you're around somebody and something doesn't feel right, especially as women, and I hate to say that, but as women, sometimes we can be put in more vulnerable places in heathenry since we are often a minority at gatherings. If something doesn't feel right, get out of there, or don't involve yourself. Trust your intuition on that, but also watch and see what they do and see how that lines up with what you think heathenry should be.
Absolutely.
But I want to add, if you know of people who you respect within the heathen community online, and community is the wrong word,
Small
diaspora
C.
tend to use.
The
Small C.
colloquial, small
Yeah.
C community.
If you know of people and you can reach out to them, ask their opinions, or come with a story from an event you've been and be like, hey, what do you think of this? This kind of struck me as weird. And see what other heathens think of it. Because sometimes the only way you can get a good big C community is to lean on the experiences of others, see what that looks like and what that is. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll definitely start by seconding Josh's suggestion. I've seen people do that. I've done it myself. When I see a community that I don't know about, I'll ask people that might know about it. Hell, there was a kindred from out east that I followed on Facebook for over a year because a friend of mine out there asked if I could get an opinion on them for her. And in the end, I told her to steer clear of them. But so I would say if you have to ask that question, I think the answer is definitely to find somebody whose opinion you respect and try to get their opinion on it. But if you don't have anybody who's in that position, who either somebody who might know or can get a read on them, or you just don't have that person to go to in the first place, a lot of it is just to know what you're talking about, at least on a certain things. If you meet with them somewhere public.
Yes.
Don't go to their ground. Go to neutral ground. And if you're able to do that, and this might not be the best advice for everybody, but it worked for me, is I tend to go and poke the bear a little bit. I ask provocative questions, or I make provocative statements and see what their reactions are to it. And a lot of times that'll tell me everything I need to know inside of 10 minutes.
And, I mean, that you have a very outgoing...
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
I do.
You have a very direct style, and that might not be the best way for everyone.
Like I said, not the best advice for everyone.
It's a valuable point to make that sometimes you have to be direct with your question. And asking the question is quite simple to make. You should ask, hey, your thoughts on... on that vein, speaking of asking questions, I guess, Torn, you recently went to a pagan pride, and again from, I guess he wants to go by JC, as red's just a color, but what is a good way to approach a kindred or an individual who is heathen at a pagan pride event? How do you set up that interaction to where nobody comes into it thinking, oh, they're just a fluffy, Wicca-true, waste of my time type situation?
Okay. Now, I mean, for my experience, I'll answer that question the best I can, though my experience in this particular instance is a little bit skewed because of the position I was in there. Because, well, for one, I was running a booth along with my tribe. So as often as not, people were approaching us, and other groups were approaching us to either see who we are or try to, advertise their own stuff to them. And but to be honest with you, my methods when it comes to even events like that is going to be the same as it would be if I were meeting a group of heathens at a pub moot. I'm going to be direct. I'm going to ask difficult questions, and the fact of the matter is, at least in my perspective as a tribal leader, I would 100% respect somebody who just comes straight out and asks me the questions that are important to them, that are going to affect their opinion of my tribe. Come out to me and ask me what I think of people of different races or different races in heathenry. Come out and ask me what I think of homosexuals or transgenders. Ask me what I think of certain types of ritual or whatnot. The things that are going to affect your opinion of that group. Just ask those questions directly.
Well, and again, you get that directness. Lauren, I know you've had more experience with the general pagan community I've had. What would you suggest to a heathen who is going to a pagan pride event? How should they handle the fact that they will be the outsider in that situation?
Well, I think number one, you need to be respectful um, while maintaining your own boundaries. So, for instance, if you don't want to participate in whatever their main ritual is, that's fine. You don't have to, and no one's saying you should. It's perfectly acceptable to just hang out and watch. But on the other hand, don't, like, we joke a lot, and we do say, you're not the boss of me, you're not doing it right. But man, don't go into somebody else's house and tell them how awful they're doing it wrong. Just go in, be respectful, be a good person. Um, don't over imbibe. Just, in general, just be a good guest. I think that's the best way to think about it. You're a guest there, and just be a good guest. Take away from it what you take away from it, even if what you take away from it is, oh, I'm never going back to one of those again. Um, and in general, I have found that here we have done, I've done Pagan Pride here as both a Wiccan and as a heathen. And it got to the point that we don't do, as heathens, we just don't really do Pagan Pride anymore because we were seeing no, like, return on our investment. The pagan community here is so small. Everybody knows everybody. And quite frankly, if anybody came up to anybody and asked about heathens, they know where to point them. So really, I said just go in and be a good guest, be a good person, and if it's kind of crap, then leave. I mean, no one's holding you hostage there. Even if you set up a booth, cut your losses and leave.
Well, and to kind of go along with that a little bit, the whole be a good guest thing is there's no secret in the fact that there are oftentimes some tension between the heathen community and the greater pagan community, especially between us and the Wiccans, for reasons. And you have to remember when you go to an event like that you are not on your ground. And I know there were a few times at this most recent gathering that our tribe went to where I just had to grit my teeth and smile and run this mantra in the back of my head saying, you're at a pan-pagan event, not a heathen event. Be nice. And just repeated that over and over again in my head. And there's a difference between there's a difference between letting people roll over you and being nice. I mean, there was a group there that was displaying themselves as heathen that were talking all sorts of crazy talk about having some big open ritual and, calling the Four Corners to invoke Loki and work with Angerboda.
Huh?
Yeah. Just let's move past that and agree that it's absurd.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. But this was a thing, and I had to tread that ground between on one side being polite and on the other side saying, I think you're full of shit and you're a danger to yourself and others. But finding a polite way to say that. I find that these people will typically catch themselves out. And you'll be able to tell pretty quick. But I think that's sort of bringing us to the end of our show. I know we have a few more things to go over and pitch before we sign off for the night. Josh?
We do, and we made a commitment back to be a resource. And in that vein, upcoming weekend, if I'm not mistaken, I have the event here. There's Midwest Thing. It's being held in place of Across the Plains. Again, that's been canceled. I'm sure anyone who has signed up has already received their refund, as Jotun's Bane has said you should have. But in the same campground this weekend, there is an event. The typical Camp Gaia rules will apply. It goes from 12 p.m. on Friday through 11:59 or 12 p.m. on Sunday, and they want you to come out and be around other heathens. This is a perfect opportunity to grow your network and build a community. And so go be a part of this. Tickets are available at the Gaia website, which I believe is
Camp Gaia.
if I can find it. Go ahead, Lauren.
CampGaia.org. I can't make it this year. I can't make it this year because I have other obligations to doing a college degree. But this is going to be an important thing, especially if you're in the Midwest. I mean, this is a Midwest thing, and it's important. And if you can go and please and show Ida Plainsmen who have organized it your support, if you're a Midwest heathen or a Mid-South heathen, it's important. I'm going to say that. If you can go, it's important.
It is important. And again, there's a Facebook page for it, and we want our listeners to be part of we want you to go and be part of these things. We don't want you to just sit here and listen to us because we're just three people bullshitting for 90 minutes on a Wednesday night. Go be part of something.
Absolutely.
Torin, I believe you had something to say.
Yeah, I've got a couple of quick things I wanted to go over. First of all, we keep mentioning that we would love to do some Heathen Talk T-shirts, both to make a little cash for the podcast, something more than just asking you to donate, something you can get something back out of. But in order to do that, we're going to need some really good artwork. We have asked you in the past and mentioned this before that somebody thought it would be a fantastic idea to turn me into a My Little Pony and make a Torin is Magic shirt. So if anybody out there has any skill with art and thinks they can turn me into a My Little Pony, go for it. And beyond that, if anybody thinks they have some good ideas for Heathen Talk T-shirts in general, feel free to submit your artwork and we can take a look at it, and maybe yours will be what gets picked. So you can have that out there on the shirts that absolutely everybody will be wearing this season. We're going to get these shirts out there one way or the other, so your donation of artwork will make that happen better and probably make them look better than what we'll come up with on our own.
If I have to sketch it, it's going to look like crap.
It's going to
tell
look
you right now.
terrible.
Do you really want the blind girl designing T-shirts? Because we'll do it. I'll do it. I'm not afraid. But no, we will have some You're Not the Boss in Me and You're Not Doing It Right shirts as well. We're hoping to maybe even come out with some other handy-dandy nifty products in the near future.
Right, maybe we can even get some Heathen Talk branded glasses one of these days.
Ooh.
Right.
The point is, we want to come up with, and we will launch, a store where you can go and get gear with sayings that we use, like "You're not the boss of me," "You're doing it wrong," "Torin is magic," "Torin is a hippie," "Why do we let Torin be on the show?"
Shut up, Torin.
On whatever you want to put it on.
Hey, speaking of me continuing to open my mouth, another thing I wanted to... Oh, continue, Josh.
Oh, no, go ahead. You want to continue opening your mouth.
I do, because I wanted to go ahead and do a really quick pitch again for Cascadia Moot. Just give it a couple of seconds here, pointing out to you that the more of you that sign up for this, the better it's going to be. We have secured our site in Granite Falls, Washington for this. I've been going to this site for various reasons for about 12 years now. It's a beautiful place, and you will enjoy it. There will be camping facilities as well as limited bunk facilities. And it's going to be people with disabilities first in the bunks, but after that, whatever space we have left. There are RV hookups there as well, and it's only $50 for the weekend, and $50 gets you in the door, $50 gets you fed for the weekend. And the more people that sign up, the better perks we're going to have for being there. The reason I'm pushing this out now again is because we do have a break even. We need to get at least 20 people to sign up before we can, cover our costs of food and entrance for the weekend. So everybody after 20 is just making the thing more awesome. So get out there early, get your $50 in, get your secured spot, and show up to Cascadia Moot.
Yes, I will be
Definitely.
there. We're trying to get our producer there as well, so you can come meet the whole cast.
And so before we sign off, and I will let Torrin and Lauren do that, I do want to remind you we have the Patreon. Apparently, we already have a donor. So go, and if you love the podcast, help us make it better. That's $1 a month, $2 a month. I don't care. 50 cents, whatever makes you happy. Just, we could use your help at least covering our costs. And on that,
I just want to say that you
someone...
yeah, you're not, you're doing it wrong.
And you're not the boss of me.
Y'all have a good
Have a
week.
good night, everybody.